keep your comments or questions to no more than 2 minutes.
Mhm.
But, okay, let's
Uh,
go.
I have my hand up.
Oh, okay. Okay, what we can, who has their hand up?
on the
Oh,
left.
Connie, okay. Okay, I'll let you go first then.
Oh, okay, thank you, and thank you, Sharad. Good to see you, and also thank you so much for this interesting perspective on this. I very much enjoyed it. I just right before I jumped onto this meeting, I saw on the news that China has called for ceasefire. So, do you think that the U.S. would follow, or I mean, of course we don't know for sure, but how much effect would that have of just China asking for that?
Well, it doesn't happen overnight, so this is a good point that, China has been trying to position itself to be a mediator. Turkey has also been positioning itself as a mediator, and it has actually, Turkey brokered negotiations between Russia and Ukraine to obtain the grain deal that enabled grain to be exported from both countries through the Black Sea. And China's initiative is a very welcome one. And China is one country which the Western media portray China as siding with Russia. And the reality is that China does not side with either side, and sees a middle path. That it sees that the Russian invasion was wrong, was unjustified, but at the same time Russia had its legitimate concerns, and it had very few choices. And so it's on that basis that it is calling for negotiations. The only way that the negotiations will actually come about is if more countries join the bandwagon, and more countries call for the negotiations and a ceasefire, and eventually some European countries will probably come around to this view. Right now, the United States under Biden is steadfast in saying that Ukraine must win, and of course that will go nowhere. But that is the current U.S. position. Zelensky himself is saying, we will not stop fighting until we recover every inch of Ukrainian soil, including Crimea. But that's what they're saying right now. It could be a negotiating position. Let's hope it's just a negotiating position. But I think it will take time for the Chinese proposal to gain traction. But we'll see. At least there's some hope.
Okay, thank you so much.
Yes.
I'm Matt Owen with Red Star Report, Voices for the California Nation. Given that our economy, California's economy, has risen from 6th largest to 5th largest after the damage to the UK economy and Brexit, to 4th largest after the damage to the German economy of very recent vintage and having everything to do with this war. My question to you is, what effect do you think that California's independence from the United States would have on this conflict?
Well, okay, so the question is, I'm just going to repeat it for the benefit of everyone. California's economy has grown to be the 4th largest in the world, and so what would be the impact of California on this conflict if California were to break away from the U.S.?
Right, to break away from the U.S., precisely.
Well, first of all, it's very unlikely. Just at the moment, it would be a very long process. I mean, it's even a long process for Jefferson to break away from California, right? But assuming that it would happen, I think that the rest of the U.S. is, you know, is still basically, I mean, it's, you know, being persuaded by the Biden administration's rhetoric that this is a war for democracy. It's a war for it's an existential war for Europe and Western values. And California breaking away from the U.S. isn't going to change that. I mean, it will change the politics, you know, the domestic politics on issues like abortion, like voting rights, and so forth. But it makes there's little differentiation in terms of foreign policy that California would you know, make on this. So I don't think that it would really affect the U.S. position on this war.
Well, you have the U.S. line, which is, you know, you've repeated fairly accurately. And what we're looking at is an alternative line in which we see the U.S. descending into fascism and supporting fascism. And has for a long time, and we want nothing to do with it. Okay, so we, in our view, are the ones fighting for democracy and freedom and all that. Okay, and the U.S. Is basically opposing those. I mean, just recently, you had a condemnation, bipartisan support for condemnation of socialism, which, you know, you can set to one side, but then you contrast that with their continued vetoing of the condemnation of Nazism, the most odious fascism ever, right? We have a saying, when somebody tells you who they are, you should believe them. Okay, so yeah, you've very faithfully reproduced what the U.S. line is. We in our independence movement, in order to build support, have a very different and opposing line that the U.S. is in the process of falling to fascism. Okay, one fascist coup attempt, and very few people prosecuted for it.
I want to give a chance to other people.
Of course.
Questions, so I'll just summarize.
So yeah,
By saying that the gentleman here was concerned about the U.S. You know, descending into fascism, and thank you for the comment. So, other questions? I see some online, but let me go to Alex.
Yeah. So I read recently, like 24 hours or 48 hours ago, Trump made a comment that if he were president, he would negotiate peace in Ukraine within 24 hours. Why are some Republicans, like Marjorie Taylor Greene and Trump, taking a more left-wing position on the conflict than the actual Progressive Caucus?
No, that's an excellent question. I mean, so I will have to say that you know, Trump, when he was president, you know, was in some ways taking positions that were against U.S. involvement in foreign wars that were more decisive than what Obama and previous Democratic presidents have done. And I mean, part of this is that, you know, if the U.S. is involved in wars that it cannot win, or wars that do not make the U.S. number one, okay, then why should we be in those wars? And also there's the Republican perspective on you know, eliminating unnecessary spending. So there are some merits to some of these considerations, and sadly the Democrats are using war as a means means to what they think is to win votes. You create a foreign threat, you exaggerate a foreign threat, and then use that to make a forceful response militarily, and use that as a basis to what they think is to win votes. And the cost of this, of course, is a little bit hard to say, because we've had so many separate occasions where Biden has promised, additional hundreds of millions and billions and billions of dollars of aid. Not all of that comes out of the budget. A lot of it is just arms transfers of arms that the U.S. already has, and so we don't even have a good handle on exactly how much aid has been given to Ukraine and how much is committed. But for sure, there's not. There are variations between Republicans and Democrats, and some of them, like Rand Paul, would be absolutely opposed to giving this kind of level of military aid. But in essence, there's not a big difference here. It's still about U.S. hegemony. When you go with Republicans and Democrats, it's still one of the driving factors is U.S. hegemony. Okay, I'll go to Pete, and then I'll take some.
I have some big differences with you, but I'll just pose it in terms of a question. Considering that Medea Benjamin depended on Nazis having the real power, when she was here in November, what do you say? What do you think about the Democratic Party, for instance, sending weapons and sending money to an admittedly Nazi organization, a Nazi-led government in Ukraine? Shouldn't the U.S. just stay the hell out of it? Just get the hell out of it? To cut off all spending, like some voices are. I know some voices are calling for it. Well, shouldn't that be the question, instead of searching for a ceasefire, a magical ceasefire that never worked before? Every time there's a ceasefire, Russia gets screwed. So that's my question.
So the question is shouldn't we just stop the military aid, and because ceasefires don't work? But I disagree that ceasefires don't work. We have some of them are a little bit different. They're like the armistice in Korea. That armistice has largely held.
I'm talking about Ukraine.
But
Ukraine. I didn't say anything about any other ceasefires. The ceasefires in Ukraine for Minsk, they didn't work. That's what pissed Russia off. That's what provoked Russia, like you said. You're right in saying Russia was provoked. You're wrong in saying that they were unjustified in doing so.
Okay, so one of the reasons why ceasefires are very difficult to implement in Ukraine is because there's so many independent players. It's not just two armies. There are a lot of these non-state militias, and but we must try. We must try to, because there's no alternative. Anything is better than war. Okay, let me answer. And so the way to do it is to call for a ceasefire and then stop the arms transfers, stop all arms transfers into Ukraine that can be used by anyone. I know it's going to be hard to enforce, but that is what we have to try. As to your notion that it's a neo-Nazi government, I disagree. That it's a neo-Nazi government. I explained.
I didn't say that.
But
I didn't say that.
Yeah. Well, okay, but that's what I heard. So there are not neo-Nazi groups there for sure, and the U.S. acting blindly, acting as if it's blind to these neo-Nazi groups is a serious problem. I want to go to another question, so let me take Michael Kerr.
hand up. Where is it?
If he's muted.
I see you're unmuted, but I don't hear you.
I neither hear nor see him.
Okay, let's come back to Michael. I saw another hand up here. Was there a hand over here?
There's a question in the chat.
Oh, is that what it is? Okay, so Derek Tennant asked the question, is there any concern that the stock of weapons is being led from the West, leaving Europe vulnerable? I see the US deindustrialization, meaning that we can produce a handful of very expensive units, presumably weapons, but not the large amount of less sophisticated guns and ammo being used every day in this war. When will this issue break into the public awareness? Well, yes, so it is true that the stocks of weapons, in particular ammunition, missiles, are being used up in the war in Ukraine at a rate that is much higher than the rate that these munitions can be produced in the United States and in Western Europe. So these are estimates, but there are estimates that Ukraine alone is using up 90,000 rounds of ammunition and missiles per month. And this exceeds the total production capacity of Western Europe and the US put together. And Russia, on the other hand, is using up a similar amount, but it has been preparing for this conflict, and it's also drawing from a few other countries, like for example, North Korea has been supplying weapons to the Wagner Group, and so I'm not a military analyst. I don't know how much ammunition stocks each country have, so I don't know how long they can continue. I imagine that there are efforts that are underway right now to restart production facilities, but it takes time to tool these up, and but let's say in a year's time, there undoubtedly will be more production capacity in the West. But how this impacts the war, I don't know, because I don't know how many rounds of ammunition are in stock. Each of these countries are also holding back a certain amount for their own defense. No country is going to give away all of its stock of ammunition and missiles. And so we'll see.
No, question.
Yes.
So it was a very good compilation and good presentation. So Putin has been saying from the beginning, early 2000, that NATO expansion is no good for the security of Russia. So what is the one main reason that you would say that it provoked Putin to make a decision to get into this war situation, which is a loss for both sides? And who is here to gain at the end of the ceasefire down the road? And would that be expansion of NATO again into the borders of Russia?
No, so I'm trying to see whether I can rephrase the question, or summarize the question, but it's, well, I don't think I can do that, but certainly the ceasefire is a starting point, and can you maybe if you can give me the question again, I'm trying to, can you say it again?
What is the one primary reason that provoked that Russia get into this war? Then the second question is that even after the ceasefire, there could be another invasion of NATO into the borders of Russia. Would it stop further NATO expansion even after the ceasefire? If there's a ceasefire.
No, but, okay, so let me take the second one first. The second is that, is that one of the terms of the ceasefire, or one of the outcomes of the ceasefire must be there has to be some compromise, is that there must be a commitment to not expand NATO. There has to be a commitment that there cannot be a further expansion of NATO into any of the frontline states. So that means the current ones that are under consideration, that is Ukraine and Georgia, as well as Belarus. I mean, right now Belarus is allied with Russia, but that kind of expansion has to stop. And I would go further to say that there ought to be a reevaluation of why NATO should even continue to exist. Okay, and to recognize that if we there is a way to work with Russia. If we work with Russia, if we don't threaten it, if we don't, the reason that Russia invaded was because it felt that its security was threatened. It was threatened because NATO is hostile. As I said, when the Warsaw Pact was dissolved, NATO was not dissolved. So it's a threat. It's a continuing threat to Russia, even though it was not used against Russia. But its charter is about confronting Russia, and so that threat has to be removed. So we cannot have frontline states joining NATO, bringing NATO right up to Russia's heartland. So that, I hope does that answer your question? Okay. Okay.
Why should Russia agree to ceasefires when it's winning, when it thinks it's winning, and in my opinion it is winning? I view the war differently than you do. Why should they, when they've agreed to these ceasefires before, Minsk 1, Minsk 2, on, and all they just get screwed in the end. The agreements are never agreed to. They've had a 7-year war. You haven't mentioned much about the 7-year civil war that the people coming over from Western Ukraine have inflicted on the Russian people of Eastern Ukraine.
But I did show the map of this conflict in 15,000 deaths that are result roughly equal numbers on both sides in Donetsk and Luhansk, and so it was a much more low level conflict. So that was 15,000. I know is a lot of people over 8 years, but it's still a lower level conflict than what's going on right now. So if we can get the major forces to ceasefire, then and at least have the parties, at the negotiating table, and there are issues about whether we need to bring some of these non-state militias to the negotiating table. If they are military players, then probably they have to play some role at the negotiating table, because if we don't bring them in, then they can continue to violate the ceasefire.
Don't you agree that the U.S. calls the shots in this war for the Ukrainian government? It's the U.S. calling the shots, not NATO. NATO is the United States of America. Now Come on, let's get real.
No, okay, so the comment is that the US calls the shots in NATO. I agree fully that the US calls the shots in NATO. What I'm talking about is the independent militias. So the US does not control the independent militias, it doesn't control the neo-Nazis.
Where are they getting their arms from?
Well, this is what I was pointing out, right? Is that Western powers are funneling all these arms into Ukraine, and the Ukrainian government is distributing them, including to the militias. So it's getting these arms, these Western arms, are getting into the neo-Nazi militias, and this is a future threat. So it's important to have a ceasefire and have a moratorium on arms transfers into Ukraine. But these two have to happen simultaneously.
First of all, let me speak in support of your point about non-state militias. If you look at, for example, the Good Friday Accords in Northern Ireland, and also the accords that brought, just as two examples, civil wars to an end in Lebanon for a time at least, they all had to involve the non-state militias, otherwise there'd have been nothing. Okay, and so they did, on both sides, signed on, not all of them, but the biggest ones. So let me speak in support of your point there. However, let me also point out that, or ask you, what the effect on the U.S. ability to fund the Ukrainian side would be if they no longer received the tax receipts of California. Okay, we are a donor state. There are others, of course. And let me sort of expand on that slightly. What if California is only the first domino of independence on both sides, by the way, in the U.S.? We predict that without us, it would be like Russia leaving the Soviet Union, which they did. Check a map. There is no USSR. So what effect do you think that our independence and no more federal taxes going to the U.S. would have on their ability to fund not just Ukraine, but the other belligerents that they have constantly funded, their ability to send troops to other places without our money?
Well, so the question is what would be the impact if California were to be independent of the U.S. Because that would deny that much tax revenue to the U.S. government in carrying out wars and military aid. And again, I mean, it's a percentage reduction, and California represents maybe, I'm just guessing, maybe 14% of the U.S. GDP.
Yeah.
Maybe 14% of tax revenues. And so
Net.
that means 86% is still there. So it's going to have an impact, but it's not going to be decisive in U.S. government decision making to not do these things. These policy determinations are going to be made on the basis of threat perception and the quantity of the aid, might be reduced by 14% or something like that. But it's not going to make a qualitative change in policy. Maybe quantitative and not qualitative. Are there any other questions or comments? Okay, Pete.
Russia thinks they're winning the war, and they don't. If they want to, they do believe in negotiation. What they want to negotiate is an unconditional surrender by the Nazi forces of the Ukrainian government, fascist government of Ukraine. Thank you.
So the comment was that Russia would like to see the unconditional surrender of the neo Nazi forces in Ukraine. And no, that is something that is to be negotiated. So
That's what they want to negotiate.
I think that you know these militias need to be part of those these considerations that a negotiated settlement is going to have to consider. You know, what is the future of these non-state militias? That there has to be a way of reining them in and you know, bringing them under control.
Which is the first thing.
Why is the Communist Party of Ukraine outlawed, but all the neo-Nazi groups are allowed in Ukraine?
Well, I mean, okay, so the question is, why is it that the Ukrainian Communist Party is outlawed, but the neo-Nazi groups aren't? And, well, it's a good question. I thank you for that question. Part of it has to do with history. Is that when Ukraine became independent in 1991, there's this. What usually happens when this happens is that there is a reaction to the past, and there was a bitter experience, at least in the minds of many Ukrainians, of being under Soviet rule, and so it was a reaction that we don't want to go back to that, and so anything that is associated with that, with the Communist Party, they wanted nothing to do with it. And the same thing happened in Poland, same thing happened in Baltic states. Baltic states are above all, they're anti-Russian.
You know, they
and
have
they're
Russians
anti-Russian
in them.
because of that historical experience. Now, 100 years from now, that may change. They may be able to have a more balanced perspective on their own history. And,
They had their own Russian speakers. It was Stalin.
but the historical, you know, experience has a big impact on people's immediate thinking. I haven't seen any hands online, but I just want to make another call. If anyone of you who are online have any observations or questions, please feel free. Anyway, we're just about running out of time. We're 8:30, so we've been on for 2 hours. So if there are no more questions, then we'll. Oh, so there's one more question. I'll take the last question.
How come you have